The interruption by Mr. Meijeren.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. The bill is about countering unwanted influence and undermining of the democratic rule of law. In light of this, Ms. Becker just expressed her concerns about, and I quote, ultra-conservative views that would frustrate gay emancipation and women's emancipation. That worries me because no matter how you look at it, whatever you think of those views, they are political views. And isn't it up to the legislator to refrain from countering political views that are not criminal in themselves? In a democracy, isn't every debate better off with as many different views as possible so that ultimately the voter can decide for themselves what the voter finds most convincing and which political views should or should not be represented here? Can Ms. Becker elaborate a bit more on how she envisions countering those so-called ultra-conservative views?
Chair, it was a response to Mr. Elabassi. It was about the Zembla broadcast. So, firstly, I did not make this remark in relation to this bill regulating that. It concerns a study that my party has requested regarding that conservative influence, and I did not come up with this myself. It stems from several reports, including the report from Justice for Prosperity. It states that there is a concerning development ongoing where, under the guise of so-called family organizations, money flows from abroad to organizations that then incite homophobia and misogyny. And what I do not share with Mr. Van Meijeren is that this is always just a political opinion by definition. If it incites hatred, if it incites the undermining of our democracy and our free way of life, if it ensures that gays are treated differently than heterosexuals, that women are treated differently than men, then there is indeed a limit to what we can still consider as merely a political opinion or freedom of expression. Then the freedom of another is being compromised. And then we stand up to protect these people and also to counteract such forms of influence. And that is why I want an investigation into those financial flows, because I am very concerned about it.
From Van Meijeren.
Inciting hatred is indeed punishable. So, when there is incitement to hatred, action can already be taken against it. Do I understand correctly from Ms. Becker's response that she believes that purely influencing the public debate, where ultra-conservative views that might oppose gay emancipation or women's emancipation are concerned, as long as it is not punishable, that politics should also stay far away from it, and that the boundary should really be at punishable expressions?
And ultimately, it is always the case that a judge in this country, it is a constitutional state, so it is not up to us as politicians to, well, do all sorts of things ourselves, as if the legal judgment ultimately lies here or somewhere else. But that lies with the judge. I agree with Mr. Van Meijeren on that. But it is indeed our duty if we see that toxic ideas are being spread on the internet, which at this moment maybe no one knows where they come from or no reports are being filed against them. Or if a pattern is not being made clear, which is indeed dangerous for our democracy, then it is indeed the duty of politicians to make that clear and to ask, are there no illegal activities happening here? I find it, for example, a very interesting development that misogyny is currently classified as extremism in the UK. And why? Because these kinds of breeding grounds for hate ultimately lead to so many young men now thinking that it is also okay to use violence against a woman, that it is okay to see her as your possession. And those are things where I believe we as politicians have a duty to counteract. And if Mr. Van Meijeren says, well, yes, if someone thinks that, then you can file a report, and then it's up to a judge. No, because it is also up to politics to set norms and stand up for vulnerable groups who otherwise, due to these kinds of breeding grounds, ultimately get discriminated against or face violence.
In conclusion on this point, Mr. Van Meijeren. Yes, Chairman. Of course, we also believe that there should be no room for hate and violence, etc. And it is true that the judge ultimately determines the limits of freedom of expression. Well, he assesses the law that we establish here, and we can decide here together how much leeway we give the judge to interpret according to their own judgment. And currently, the law does not include the criterion that it must concern activities that are punishable. I just asked the minister whether it can also concern opinions that are not punishable. Worryingly enough, could not provide an answer. But can I count on the support of Ms. Becker if I submit an amendment to legally ensure that opinions which would undermine the democratic rule of law can only be countered when they are also punishable opinions, so that we do not end up with a judge who assesses at their own discretion what is or isn't undermining, but that a clear boundary is set. Punishable opinions can be acted against. Opinions that are not punishable, we as politicians or judges or any other institutions will not interfere with. That is up to the free societal debate.
No, Chairman, Mr. Van Meijeren cannot do that because we are here today to ultimately lay down something as legislators on which the judge can base their judgment. The minister has presented something where it really must concern the disruption of public order or the undermining of democracy. The minister has also convincingly demonstrated that it is proportional and very targeted. He has also made a number of adjustments following the Council of State, and I think that is very well substantiated. And now we are submitting an amendment saying that ultimately we do not find all of that severe enough yet. Should it concern things that are already punishable? If something is punishable, as the minister also indicates, if things happen within an organization that are punishable, then the minister refers to Article 22 of the Civil Code, and he can prohibit an organization. But what is not possible at the moment is that if something happens in an organization that causes significant societal concern, and we see that it is also combined with funding from abroad, we have no way to further inquire about it or to restrict that financing. I find it very important that the minister is now adding that to the legal framework. That can ultimately be a final measure to prohibit an organization, but you have more tools at the front end to intervene. I think that's very good.
Yes, well, let me just briefly. Now, the truth comes out because these are all very nice words about undermining and how dangerous it is. But at the moment when it is asked to set strict boundaries on that, by also placing that boundary at criminal expressions, as should naturally be the case in a democracy and as has been the case since World War II until today, then Ms. Becker fails to deliver, and I find that very concerning.
I didn't hear a question, Chairman.